Okay, next one. An aircraft is climbing at a 30-degree angle to the horizontal. How fast is the aircraft gaining altitude if its speed is 500 miles per hour? So I have read the problem. Now I'm going to draw a picture. An aircraft is climbing at a 30-degree angle. And so here's my airplane right there. We'll just call it a plane. Could be some other aircraft, but we'll call it a plane. And it is climbing at a 30-degree angle. And we are told absolutely that that is 30 degrees. That is unchanging. That can go in the picture. But all calculus is done in radians, so pi over 6. Recall. 30 degrees. 30 degrees equals 30 degrees times pi over 180, which gives me pi over 6 radians. Calculus is done in radians, and the way you convert degrees to radians is to multiply by pi over 180. And so, finishing the rest of the picture, it says an aircraft is climbing at 30-degree angle to the horizontal. How fast is the aircraft gaining altitude? There's my altitude sign. I will call it X. You can call it whatever you want, but be sure you label it. How fast is the aircraft gaining altitude when its speed is 500 miles an hour? Speed is a rate of change, velocity, and what it is measuring is how the line that the plane is on is changing. So the speed is talking about this hypotenuse right there, the line that the plane is traveling on. And so we're going to give that a name, y. There's my picture. Step 3, figure out what you're told. An aircraft is climbing at an altitude of 30 degrees to the angle, 30-degree angle to the horizontal. That was our picture. How fast is the aircraft gaining altitude? How fast is the plane gaining altitude? Well, that's telling me to find dx dt, because I labeled my altitude, my height, with an x. How fast is that altitude changing? Find dx dt. Again, if you didn't put an x there, writing down dx dt is meaningless. You didn't tell me what x is. And I will look to see that you told me what those variables mean. You don't tell me what those variables mean, you lose points because you've given useless information. And then lastly, if its speed is 500, if speed is 500 miles per hour, that would be that dy dt equals 500. Okay, now we need a picture, need an equation. We need an equation. That relates a right triangle an angle, because I have that pi over 6, and so I have to start thinking trigonometry. It is not going to be the Pythagorean theorem, because the Pythagorean theorem doesn't have an angle in it. Also, the Pythagorean theorem talks about all the sides, and we weren't really told about one of the sides. Don't introduce information, or try not to introduce information that they didn't give you any details about. They didn't talk anything about this bottom of the triangle, so try not to introduce it. But what they did give us was a right triangle, an angle, and then since we're thinking trigonometry and right triangles and angles, an angle with its opposite side and hypotenuse. So we think trig for a while, opposite and hypotenuse, and that's sine, which is opposite over hypotenuse. So in this case, sine of pi over 6 equals x over y. There's my equation. Always simplify if you can. And so I certainly can simplify here. Sine of pi over 6 is 1/2. Simplify some more, which is I can cross multiply. And I get 2x equals y. And there's my equation. That's what's going to do it for us. And notice by just sticking with the very basics, I end up with a very easy equation. If you can get this far, the steps on everything else is basically the same. So step 5, implicitly differentiate, excuse me, with respect to t. The cough was not COVID, plus I'm in an empty room, so it doesn't matter, but it's not COVID. Just got a tickle in my throat. So derivative of 2x would be 2, but every single variable gets followed by its derivative, so with respect to t, so dx dt. The derivative of y would be 1, but every single variable gets followed by its derivative with respect to t, so dy dt. So 2 dx dt equals dy dt. Six. That's not the number 6. Step 6. Substitute in known information. So we were told that dy dt was 500, I believe, was the known information. Yes, it was. So 2 dx dt equals 500. And then step 7, solve for dx dt. And we will get dx dt equals 250. And there's that guy. And we will end this video and move on to the last problem from this section.